Up next, 5.2, Capital Improvement Plan. I would like to invite Jeff LaRose, Executive Director of Facilities and Operations, to the podium.
If I might, as Mr. LaRose comes forward, I want to kind of put a large frame to this. There's a lot in Mr. LaRose's presentation tonight, and we've been working, as the board knows, for several weeks now, Jeff and I and a number of other people, on trying to get this right. Here is what I consider to be kind of the critical question. We're looking for a solution to make sure that our two taxpayer-supported revenue sources, that we look at and normally look at under the general fund that Mr. Griffith reports on, and the other one being the permanent improvement levy that funds our capital improvement projects, right? Those are the two major bank accounts that are taxpayer funded. We've tended to focus on the general fund a great deal and talked about its health and where we are. And in fact, if you look at Mr. Griffith's last couple presentations, every time he presents, it gets a little bit better. And so we've noted that we're in good stead there. On the other side of the equation, as we look at capital improvements tonight, and you look at the permanent improvement dollars that support that, and what Mr. LaRose has been pointing us to is the complexion of that revenue source is changing and puts us in kind of a precarious position as it relates to facilities and on that side of the operations. And so what we're looking to do is talk to the board this evening in kind of a work session about how we might make some tweaks to make sure that both sides of that equation, general fund and permanent improvement dollars for capital improvement projects, are in a position to be long-term sustainable. When the capital improvement budget is not in good shape, you're deferring work. And I make the analogy to looking at the paint on the outside of your house that starts to peel, and every summer that you decide not to do it, it gets a little bit bigger and a little bit more expensive. And when you're talking about 20-plus buildings and the age of our fleet that Mr. LaRose is going to point to tonight, you can start to see what the pressure point is. So underneath that, if we're able to come to some understanding about how to do that, how to stabilize that budget, then we have opportunity for some projects that might be exciting for us in the community as we move forward. So that's kind of where I really want us to be this evening. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. LaRose.
Thank you, Dr. Kellogg, members of the board. This evening's presentation is part 2 of our facility master plan, picking up from when we presented to the board on December 8th. Last month's presentation focused on student enrollment forecasts as compared to school building capacities, and this presentation will focus on the next 5-year capital improvement plan and the needs of our building infrastructure. The following information has been reviewed by the executive team and our facilities leadership team that includes maintenance, grounds, and custodial services. Topics for board discussion include capital funding covering the next 5 years, a plan for renovating Point View Elementary that would provide walls to enclose the classrooms, a utilization plan for Central College. Our current plan for Longfellow is to open for instructional use in 2016-2017. Barbara Wallace is currently working on options, and she will present a recommendation to the board in February. And last, the future of the warehouse annex located in Uptown Westerville. The facility master plan is used to ensure that we have adequate space to accommodate changes in enrollment and instructional programs. The capital improvement plan is a part of the master plan and functions to replace building and equipment components after useful life expires. Our maintenance, grounds, fleet, and custodial teams spend a majority of their time implementing our preventive maintenance plan designed to maximize the life of building and equipment components prior to being replaced under the capital plan. We utilize multiple means to measure our effectiveness. Our primary measure is instructional downtime. The objective is not to close any school due to the failure of a building component maintained by Westerville Schools. In addition, we track the number of work orders that are customer generated to identify ways to improve our preventive maintenance plan. We develop project schedules designed to ensure that building occupancy permits are obtained prior to the start of school as it relates to summer construction projects. Our construction bid process is audited by the state each year to validate compliance to the Ohio Revised Code, and we continue to demonstrate strong physical accountability as measured by the cost of change orders. Challenges that we are faced with include our aging fleet of schools, the average age being 47 years. The Ohio School Facilities Commission recommends that buildings be considered for replacement at 50 years. And we will be presenting the financial challenges going into the next 5-year capital plan. We continue to operate below the staffing levels recommended by the state auditor and plan to share our facility staffing recommendations as part of a future presentation by Human Resources. And there is the continued challenge of orchestrating the construction activity each summer within a 10-week window covering up to 28 sites. So let's start by reviewing the condition of our buildings prior to the building expansion program in 2001. In May of 2001, the Ohio School Facilities Commission hired a team of engineers to evaluate the condition of our 20 schools. This was prior to the construction of Alcott, Faust, and Central. The OSFC recommends that if the cost to renovate a building exceeds 2/3 the cost to replace a building, that the building be replaced. In 2001, 10 of our 20 schools were being recommended for replacement. This chart shows the percentages, the top 4 over 100%, with Hanby being the highest at 120, and a renovation cost of $7 million. And you can see at the bottom that Charrington and Huber Ridge just missed the cutoff by 1%. And keep in mind that these buildings are now 14 years older. You can see Whittier's percentage at 49 years was 97%, supporting the OSFC's 50-year building replacement cycle. And currently, 9 of our schools are over 50 years old, 4 are over 80. From the assessment, $110 million of improvement needs were identified. And this chart shows the needed funds per building component. The first item, non-construction, includes the engineering, construction management, and all soft costs associated with the suggested renovations. The team identified $17.4 million in general finish work that includes painting, flooring, ceiling replacements, and the replacement of casework. Next was $15.4 million in heating and air conditioning work. The first 4 items account for 55% of the needs. The construction bond that was approved after the assessment was for $99.5 million, and this chart shows a breakdown of the bond dollars. Most of the bond money went towards new structures to accommodate our enrollment growth, that being Alcott, Faust, and and also 10 school building additions. $29.9 million was budgeted for existing infrastructure as compared to the $110 million in needs. And of the $21.9 million, most of those dollars went to install air conditioning and fire suppression systems in schools that did not have them. So the point is that a small portion of the bond money went to replace existing systems. This chart shows the assessed value of building component replacement needs as compared to the $21.9 million budgeted for system replacement. As an example, there was $17.4 million identified for general finishes and $1.6 million budgeted. The capital funds received since 2001 has helped to close the gap in many of the categories such as roofing, but the categories shown in red are where we struggle, that being general finishes, HVAC, electrical, loose furnishings, and plumbing. This is a breakdown of the annual capital funds for the current 5-year plan that ends in June as compared to the next 5-year plan. The current 5-year plan included an additional $25 million received via a tax anticipation notes. This loan is being paid back over the next 6 years. Thus, the $2.95 million budgeted for financing will be paid off going into FY22. Over the past 5 years, the current capital plan has represented 87% of our total building repair funds. The FY16, FY20 plan shows building infrastructure replacement at $1.86 million per year. Loan payback at 2.95, technology replacement at 1.9, instructional materials 1.2, bus replacement 75,000, furniture at 120,000, and tax collection fees 100,000. And the last, maintenance vehicles and custodial equipment replacement at $220,000 per year. The largest reduction is building infrastructure at $4.7 million annually.
Jeff, before you go on, could you go back to that one? I just want to pause for a second and make sure we understand what we're looking at. So, a couple of things Jeff's presented. One, if you go back to 2001, there was a report through the OSFC that said about $110 million of infrastructure repairs is what you need. A bond issue went out for about 99.5. The bulk of that wasn't spent to address those deferred maintenance costs. It was spent for new buildings because that was the need. So those deferred costs kind of retain and roll over into the next capital improvement cycle, that next 5-year cycle, and the amount of money that's available to chip away at those maintenance costs. And that essentially has come to an end. And what Jeff's pointing to here is in 11 through 15, which is the previous 5 years, there was roughly $13.84 million available each year for 5 years to support the capital improvement plan. That decreases moving forward because the TAN that he mentioned, the tax anticipation note, falls off. We no longer have that funding available. That was $25 million over 5 years. So now you're down to $9 million. And what he's showing you here in that middle column, FY16 through FY20, is where those dollars get allocated in the way we currently do business. So if we continue to divide up the permanent improvement levy, that $9.09 million, over those various categories through 16 through 20, what he's showing is building infrastructure. He's got about $1.86 million available per year for building infrastructure. Okay? That's the picture. Did I steal any thunder? Did I get ahead of you?
Good.
Okay.
All right.
So I want to pause for a minute and see if you got questions up to this point and make sure that the storyline's following. Okay? We're okay?
Kind of. I don't disagree with what you were just saying at all. Do have one question and one concern. One is the question, which is, do you have any information that you could share with me offline, because it would be way too burdensome to do it now, as regards how those renovation costs were determined by the Ohio School Facilities Commission? I don't remember what all went into that. I have some concerns with us going out saying that the School Facilities Commission says that because we have a number of buildings that are nearing or over age 50, that those buildings should be torn down and replaced. When we say that in the community, it's a very small step to take to have people begin saying that we're talking about replacing our buildings. And I've already heard that just after the last meeting. And I don't want that to be a perception in any way, shape, or form. We do have some real problems as regards capital improvements, and I'm very concerned about what's happened to the capital improvements budget over the past few years. But I don't want any of this to hinge on a depiction of our buildings that I actually don't believe fully, and I don't want the citizenry to believe that we are trying to make a case to take the wrecking ball to South or any of the other buildings.
So I'd like to tag into that particular line of thought as well, because I think that there's a bit of a gap, and, Mr. LaRose, you can correct me if I'm wrong in my statements here, but when we go back to the time frame that these buildings were evaluated by the Ohio Schools and Facilities Commission, we know, as a board and a community administration, that there is a certain penalty to be paid by doing business with the OSFC. That penalty is that all of the OSFC metrics are all conditioned on very specific parameters.
Yes.
And they do not take into account the historical significance of a building. They do not take into account the significance of that building from a community standpoint. They don't take into account the value of a repurposing of a facility. They simply say, if it is this many years old and it hits this particular equation, we recommend that it be removed. Doing business with the OSFC as a school district comes with more consequences than that if we should choose to be a part of their program. So to that point, I think it's very clear that the Westerville City School District has not chosen that path. We value our buildings, and in the cases where those buildings can be repurposed, that is our focus. And there is no interest, back to your point about where there may be some concerns in the community, there is no interest on the part of this board in any kind of mass tear down and rebuild of school buildings at all.
And there has not been over time. When that report came out, the board was not interested at that time, and the board has not been interested in any time since.
And as Mr. Byrd points out, exactly correct. If you take Ohio School Facilities Commission money under that model, then you're stuck with their rules, which is what Mr. LaRose is pointing to. What Mr. LaRose does a nice job of is using their metrics for determining our current state. What I hear the board saying is we want to retain more local control over these decisions about which buildings and when, and not be stuck to their timeframes and their timelines. And I agree. We're not asking to go out in conjunction with OSFC. It's just a metric for us to say. And so I agree with Dr. Nestor Baker and Mr. Byrd that we're not looking to replace all this. It's the best benchmark we have in the education community in Ohio for saying these are some measurements, and that's really
Yeah,
how we use
And
it.
you're right, and even if we were to discount the components used, the metrics used by the School Facilities Commission, even if I discounted them substantially, I would still be looking at trouble for us as regards what we have capital improvements wise. So I don't want you to think that what I am saying is suggesting that we're not in trouble as regards capital improvements, because it has become very apparent to me over the past year that we are.
Well, and I think to piggyback on that, just real quick, because again, we want to make sure that it's clear within the community where our attentions as a board and administration are, but let's not sugarcoat it. I think that's the give back from the community as well. We're saying that the district is focused on the retention and improvement of our assets. But let's face facts. Hanby has an age, right? That's not up for debate, right? Point View has an age. You know, those are assets that have lived past their usefulness based upon their original design, or they have issues. I mean, there are things that we need to fix in this district. So we do not discount what OSFC says from a factual basis, but we also can't ignore those facts and just say, well, it should be super cheap to run a 100-year-old building, right? And that's just not the reality of what we're facing.
No, it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Exactly the point. If we were to blindly follow OSFC recommendations, what we're putting in front of you wouldn't even come close to touching. In fact, I'll segue back to Mr. LaRose, because he's going to kind of point out what he's done. And this is a credit, I know we have some of his staff here this evening, this is a credit to the work those folks in operations do, because they keep these things up and running past what other people say they should be, well past. And so I'm glad they're here, and I thank them for doing that, because it's not a job everybody pays attention to, but it's an important one. That preventive maintenance piece, and it's simple things. Old systems are sometimes, you have a building that's 50 years old, it's sometimes hard just to find the parts to replace things. And these guys do a fantastic job doing that. So I thank them for being here this evening as well. So if it's okay, I'll segue back to Mr. LaRose.
Cool. Just for clarification, I don't want to mislead you and say that at 50 years, the OSFC says replace them. It's just consideration should be given for a replacement cycle, and their recommendation is starting to look at that at 50 years. That next layer is looking at the renovation costs versus replacement costs. And again, back in 2001, that rule of thumb was the 2/3 rule. So if it's 66% or greater, the recommendation would be you should consider a replacement versus a renovation. So leading into this next layer, we determined an annual building component replacement budget by using the unit cost published in OSFC's 2014 School Design Manual, and spreading these costs over not a recommended but an expanded life cycle. For example, and this is again right out of their design manual, OSFC's unit cost to replace a rubber membrane roof is $8.70 per square foot. If you multiply that times our total district square footage for a rubber membrane roof, divide it by a lifespan, and we used a 20-year life cycle. In the OSFC manual, they have listed a 7-year life cycle. We used the 20. So that budget came to $524,000. In OSFC's model, that would be $1.5 million. And just to put that in perspective, the work that we have planned this summer, and this is a partial replacement at both South and Huber Ridge, we have a budget for this summer of $1.1 million. Using this methodology for all building components, the annual building budget would need to be around $9.3 million. Prior to any budget adjustments being made, the annual capital building funds available, again, over the next 5-year period is 1.9. So that's a shortage of $7.4 million per year to maintain our schools. We have 3 capital funding options for your consideration. This spreadsheet shows option A. It's our current budget over the next 5 years. The 2 yellow rows total revenue and expenditures. Capital revenue at the very top generates $9.1 million a year. We have $1.7 million carryover balance from this previous 5-year plan that is rolling over into FY16. In Mr. Griffith's 5-year forecast, we have $500,000 from general funds for FY16 through FY19, and the Millstone Creek Agreement provides $45,000 in capital projects for Robert Frost, Heritage, and North each year. In option A, it provides an average of $2.7 million for building components as compared to the $9.3 million recommended using the life cycle replacement model. And when we look at options B and C, those will include funding to renovate and expand Point View per feedback from the Point View community. So let me talk a little bit about that. This is the Point View site that we are presenting as our #1 concern in terms of improving the learning environment. The building is 37,000 square feet, sitting on 5.7 acres, and was one of the schools recommended for replacement from the 2001 assessment. Point View is the only remaining school that operates using the open classroom environment. The classrooms at Mark Twain and Robert Frost were enclosed in 2002, and at that time it included a 4-classroom wing addition at both locations. Amherst open classrooms were enclosed with partial height walls prior to the construction bond. The bond did, however, fund a building addition at Amherst that added 1 art room and one music room. This is the current floor plan showing the classroom areas that are not defined by walls. There are 3 instructional wings, A, B, and C, with 6 classrooms in each wing. And this is a photo that I shared at the last meeting, showing how the classrooms are being separated. The average classroom size is 660 square feet, and the OSFC recommends 900. Concerns we have received: our students are easily distracted in this type of environment, and teachers must instruct quietly so as not to disrupt or disturb adjacent instructional spaces. Other concerns raised include a lack of instructional rooms. As an example, the art classroom is in the former gym locker room, that is 446 square feet. Lack of student storage for coats and backpacks. Currently, these items are being stacked in the floor. Teacher workrooms are being used for storage. The cafe is undersized. There is insufficient administration and conference space. And another concern presented was that the classrooms do not have windows. This is a floor plan showing an option to enclose the classrooms. In this plan, the average classroom size increases from 660 square feet to 705 square feet by eliminating all teacher workrooms. A renovation alone does not address the needs identified for classroom storage, teacher workspace, cafeteria space, conference space, or an art room. We did look at an option to replace the building, but when considering the cost to replace, which was twice the renovation/expansion option, we focused on an interior renovation That includes a building addition that would house 10 classrooms, as shown in the site plan. And again, this is just a schematic showing us what it could be. It's not that we're suggesting this is what it would be. An interior renovation is not an option for the start of school next year. If we started the design process by the end of this week, we could provide a solution for the start of the 2016-2017 school year. This schedule provides 3 months for design starting February 2nd, 1 month to obtain a building permit, 1 month for bidding and approval, 2 months to review shop drawings and order material, and 11 months for construction. It's a very aggressive, but it is a doable schedule. Funding option B includes a budget of $5.5 million to fund the renovation/expansion of Point View. And that would be $1.9 million in FY16 and $3.9 million in FY17. This option shows taking technology equipment replacement and the replacement of instructional materials out of the capital budget and fund using general funds. This budget provides an average of $4.6 million for building improvements as compared to $2.7 in option A and $9.3 in needs. Funding option C also reflects taking technology and instructional materials out of the capital budget and funding as part of the general fund. This option also includes a budget of $5.5 million to renovate and expand Point View, but in lieu of renovating Point View using capital funds, $5.5 million is being added from the general fund for FY16 and FY17. So when you look at 16 and 17 under general funds in red, that's adding $2.75 million each year to the $500,000. To summarize, option A does not make any changes to the capital or general fund budget. It severely impacts our ability to maintain the operation of our buildings and does not provide a funding solution to improve the learning environment at Point View. Option B will fund the Point View project. It has a $3.1 million annual impact on the general fund by pulling technology and instructional materials from the capital plan. Option B provides for a $4.6 million annual budget for buildings as compared to $6.5 million over the past 5 years. Option C will also fund Point View. It has a $4.2 million annual impact on the general fund by moving technology and instructional materials and moving $5.5 million from general funds to capital to support the Point View project. Option C provides for a $5.7 million annual budget for buildings, again, as compared to $6.5 million over the past 5 years. Moving from funding to building utilization.
Jeff, before we do that, can we go
Sure.
go back? Let's create some conversation here. Go to B. So what we're suggesting is one way to improve the capital improvement budget is to take those technology dollars and instructional materials out. Doing so leaves some room for opportunities for some projects that we'd like to do, one of which would, a high priority for us would be Point View, okay? So that's a change in appropriations that happens in June. But in order for Jeff to be able to go out to bid, we kind of have to work through that with the board. Now, understand that this is kind of a pressure point because if we miss the window of opportunity in front of us, we either don't do it, if that's where we end up, or we're delaying it and putting it out to another year. So that's the pressure point. The second thing is Jeff's shown some numbers, all of which are amendable each year, because you can make those appropriation changes as you see fit. But it goes back to the general overview that I said at the beginning. Our general fund, moving the technology and instructional materials out of capital to general fund will impact the trajectory of the general fund, but not in a manner that's going to change what we're anticipating being our need to talk to the community about additional dollars. A renewal followed sometime later for additional dollars at some point after the renewal, okay? it won't really change that trajectory unless something goes haywire on that side of the equation. And if it does, decisions you made about moving instructional materials and technology can go back. But the backlash is then, as Jeff's shown, he loses opportunities to offset project costs here. So it doesn't have to be a solid amount. It has to be a commitment to the Point View project, a commitment to moving instructional materials and technology out. And then as we move along and we see how the 5-year forecast is playing out, you can make decisions in the future about offsetting some of those costs additionally through what he said was option C. You don't have to go all the way to option C at this point. You can stair-step that along the course of things. So plan out. I'll give one more piece and I'll take some questions. We have a governor's budget, biannual budget coming up. If it meets or exceeds our current expectations, our 5-year forecast will continue to grow and get better. We've experienced better than expected revenue, and we've experienced better than expected expenditures. We've decreased those over time. In fact, a little history, in the last 5-year forecast Mr. Griffith gave, and Mr. Griffith, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking right now at about a deficit of about $6 million in FY18 between expenditures and revenues. I think 18 or 24 months ago, that was at $13 million. So over that time frame, you've shrunk that difference down. And so we continue to get better and better 5-year forecasts. So that's where I think the opportunity is there. But you're not locked into something you can't get out of later on if it's not going in the right direction. So before we move, Jeff, maybe we'll let the board ask questions.
I'm going to, for one, I'm going to express my feeling about this. Number one, Point View definitely needs to be fixed. So, you know, that has to be a part of our concern. How much money are we talking about in technology and instructional materials each year? A couple million?
$3 million.
Huh, 3 million?
$3 million per year.
3 million. So that's my second point. That shouldn't be in your budget, in my opinion. That needs to come out and go to the general fund. So that has been misplaced for a while. And so that would be a correction that would help you deal with the Point View issue, which is difficult. The teachers are making the best of it. Believe me, I've walked through it, and they're doing great. But it needs to be fixed. And so I would go, you know, at this point, I'm looking at if you could show those again, option B looks good.
This is B.
Yeah, at this point, well, you had B, okay, this one's one of the Bs. Yeah, back.
That was showing A is showing technology and instructional materials.
I'm
in the
just thinking
budget.
that we would be safe with option B at this point, based on what Dr. Kellogg's saying. We could always, like you say, go back and forth with the funds, but, you know, at least that would provide with you, wouldn't that provide you an opportunity to do some of those things if we would pull out the technology and the instructional materials and move ahead with Point View?
Well, I think that's I think that's right. We're B and C are essentially committing to a Point View
Right.
resolution to a woefully inadequate situation. Tipped my hand on that one, didn't I? So yeah, wasn't very poker-faced about it. So we love trying to figure that out. But so that's B and C. Maybe just really briefly, why, historically, remind me, technology and instructional materials, why were they ever put in?
So historically, let's talk about technology. We were purchasing desktops, right? So those of us who've gone through this evolution at home, right? You don't have an $1,100, $1,500 desktop computer at home anymore. And we've invested in these little guys at about $250 a pop. These don't fit the standard very well for capital improvement dollars anymore. They don't have that kind of shelf life to them anymore, and that's the direction we're going. So one of the things we're struggling with is you give permanent improvement dollars to technology, and sometimes what they want to purchase, we're struggling to make fit that definition. So that's a change in what we're purchasing. The same thing's happening on the curriculum side. We're used to big textbooks, and we're more and more moving towards a digital environment. That's accelerating. The advent of putting these in place and the digital curriculum we're purchasing and using in classrooms, that's going very fast. So we're kind of paralleling our roadmap for technology in terms of how we fund things. So you can do it under the current model. It's a little bit more awkward, but I think this is where we are in space now in terms of what's happening in these purchases. It makes clear sense to move it over there and fund it from there and take care of it from there. So that's kind of the historical perspective.
Yeah, and maybe everyone knew that already. I just thought, as we don't want the community to get a historical narrative of, oh, buildings are 50 years old, we want to replace them. Nobody's even entertaining that. We also, when we move funds from one fund to the other, we don't want people to get a historical, a narrative of, oh, they're just shifting money around and we don't know why. It's just at a very appropriate, it seems to me, tipping my hand again, allocation of our current level of resources.
Of the things being funded under the permanent improvement levy, those are the two that make the most sense to move over. And Mr. Griffin and I have had lots of conversations about what that means, and improved, as I describe it, an improved bank account on the capital side. It will have an immediate change the trajectory of your 5-year forecast, set it back a little bit. I'm not a gambling man, but I would bet if we continue the path that we've been going down in terms of our cost savings, I think you're going to make some of that up over the course of that 5-year forecast, and that difference where we went backwards a little bit will probably move forward again.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Rick, years ago, when that shift was initially made, John's right, that was the thinking.
Taken from the general to put into the, okay.
Yeah, when we moved those purchases over to the capital improvements fund, what we were going through then was kind of the opposite of what we see now. The capital improvements budget was the one that was healthy at that time, and the general fund was starving. So, the idea was, how do we shift within the law in a way that can make it work? And when it was done, the hope was it was only going to be for a short period of time. And here we are, whatever, I don't know, 20 years later, just now saying, oh my gosh, can we please stop doing this? So that's kind of where it was. We're kind of a mirror image in a lot of ways, which actually underscores what John was saying about we do have some options. I mean, we're pretty limited in many ways about what's in the, what could be paid for with capital improvements. We're far less limited as regards what could be paid for, from the general fund. But still, we do tend to keep things as clear as possible. But there are a few things that we're able to do some crossover on. And this, the idea of putting those costs back under the general fund makes very good sense to do that now. And I'm with you, as I look at this, my discussion, in my head is, okay, I'm willing to throw out A altogether. I don't know where everybody else is, obviously, but I'm willing to throw out option A right now because that doesn't involve making that switch. So for me, it's then looking at options B and option C because, just like Poker Face Villardo, I think that point view has to be dealt with. And you're Poker Face, too. Yeah. So, now it's a
I've been
function-
called
yeah.
worse.
Yeah, you have, but not by me.
Well, no.
At least not today.
Thank
So for me, as we look at B and C, C then becomes more of an issue of what else is out there besides point view. What else needs expenditure, and how does that play? So as we look at whether we go B, whether we go C, how we look at point view, how we look at everything else, I need more information.
Right.
Yeah,
So we can
I think B represents a floor of the change.
Yes.
And C represents the golden, the golden side. If you're Jeff LaRose and you want to do everything, that's the golden ticket. It can be anywhere in between over time as the board looks at the impact on the financial decisions. And as we go through this, as you've mentioned, are there other targeted buildings? Yes. I think there's projects out there that are waiting, going back to our strategic planning with the community and the kind of learning environments they want for kids, inspiring environments that support learning in 21st century classroom, there's a lot of room for work there across time. And interestingly, I think the Point View project, if you do the extension, offers kind of a unique opportunity to test drive some of those thinkings about what a 21st century elementary classroom would look like as you put the technology plan into place, and you look at instructional practice into place, you start to get a design piece of this might be interesting for us as a model moving forward. That would be my.
That's what they said about open
So
classrooms.
would you say that
I suffered.
open classrooms are...
I suffered through open classrooms as a child of the 70s and ruined many a teacher's day because I wasn't well,
It ran its, yeah.
I didn't manage myself well in those environments.
I bet you didn't.
So tonight, at least, you know, we need to give Jeff some guidance and so he can move forth. And, you know, I think at least two of us have kind of agreed with option B. So-
Well, I'll go ahead and
B,
hop
for
in here.
sure.
I mean, first, Dr. French, I want
Go
to
ahead.
thank you for your comments in opening this, because I think that what I find interesting is that what we hear consistently as a board is a request for us to operate within our means, right? Operate within the resources that we have. Beyond the work that the administration and the board has done over the last few years, you know, when we take a look at the two resource pools that we have, the general fund and the capital improvements fund, that represents the total bundle of resources that we have available to us. We're making a decision that I think is a prudent decision around moving those funds as to where they're most representative of what they actually do, right? And the technology piece is interesting to me because several years ago, large corporates were facing this problem as well, right? We bought an asset, it depreciated over multiple years, it had a certain lifespan. What's, for everyone that's here this evening, what's the lifespan of your smartphone right now? I mean, the technical principle is Moore's law, but I mean, in reality, your smartphone is pretty much obsolete the day that you signed your contract, just simply because that's the pace of technology. Technology has become more and more of an expense, you know, beyond large-scale infrastructure projects like, you know, broadband and bandwidth within buildings. You know, but end-user technologies are an expense, and treating them that way isn't just a good way to manage an improvement to the capital improvements fund. It's just simply a good way to manage finances, period, right? So I think that is smart. I think that creating an opportunity for an important project is smart. Now, back to the A, B, or C, frankly, I think B is the most prudent approach for us, because in my role, and working with Mr. LaRose and everyone, I'd like to go whole hog for C. However, I do think that there are enough open wickets around biennial budget. We do know that the State Board of Education has been making some conversation about issues that they feel are related to funding and/or underfunding of public school systems. We know that's going to be on the table in the docket. There are a number of moving parts that I believe we have, you know, kind of the luxury of some time to wait and see how those play out as we go into the summertime at the state government level, that could have a budgetary impact and could bring us back to the table to say, now C is a viable option. But I do think that this is an excellent way to kickstart not just a substantial project, but a major improvement from an educational standpoint, focusing on Point View and focusing on an immediate need and getting it done within our means. I think it covers all of those bases. So I'm not going to pull any punches about it. I'm a strong proponent for B. Yeah.
So I will say, as far as facilities, without our facilities, there's no instruction. So it is so important that our facilities are healthy. I am also happy with starting with B, but as we go down the road and we think about all the other things that need to take place, I think we should think about C, because these are where our kids are every day. But I know you need direction. So what I've heard tonight is everyone, Rick, would you say you're happy with B? Okay. That we're happy with B and giving you a starting spot and excited to see what comes back.
Very good.
So the mechanisms of start and stop in action would be this. What we're hearing is there seems to be, the board seems supportive of this. What would happen is, first time Jeff brings you a contract. And then if the complexion of this changes, and that's we stop the project anywhere along the way. And then the other place would be at appropriations at the end of the year when we bring those forward. So as you project out, it's going to change the appropriations at the end of the year. It will have an impact on what the 5-year forecast looks like, and we've already played with that a little bit. So I think we know where we're going, and that's, so for the public to understand what happens next, that's what will happen next. We'll start to work in that direction as if we're going down this path and start bringing contracts, and anywhere along the way, you can cut it off.
Jeff, I have one more quick question. What about feedback from staff in the neighborhood? Have we heard anything? Because I've heard some grumbles out there. Are they for it? Changes?
I haven't been part of those meetings. That was when David Baker was here, which is how this surfaced in the first place. So it's getting feedback from that point of view community. I've heard mostly from teachers and administration from the building. It's less on the parent side. But from teachers, the feedback I've received, overwhelmingly, yes, we need to enclose the classrooms.
It kind of started as a safety question at Point View and grew outward from there when David Baker
We
was
have the
here.
principal here.
Yeah,
She can speak to
Sherry's
it.
here. We
Let's
can
have
maybe
her.
have a little insight.
Thank you.
The emotions are high right now. When I first came on board, Dr. Kellogg, had asked me about open concept, and I also went to an open concept high school. And I said, well, I really just need to see. And very clearly, early on, our kids deserve more.
Yeah.
They just deserve more. The teachers are trying everything they can do, but when you have to restrict instruction and small group and collaboration, and it's limiting. The opportunities are there, but we don't have the structure for it. So, thank you. I don't have anything else to say, but thank you. So, and obviously the staff, they've been here both board meetings. And I talked to the board PTA president the other night, and she almost started crying. So, they're excited. They're ready.
Well, thank you for all you do and hanging in there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Keeping it held together there. It's difficult, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So with that, we'll move to the next phase. It's a little bit shorter.
Yeah, this is, again, talking about building utilization. This is the site plan at Central College. We have had numerous discussions on the future of this location, whether to sell, renovate, or replace the building. The building is 84 years old, housing 6 classrooms on a 4-acre site, and in 2001, the cost to renovate was 112% of the cost to replace. Due to declining elementary enrollment and a failed operating levy, Central College was closed for the start of the 2012-2013 school year. Last year, we proposed using the building for shared service opportunities, and in September, the board approved a lease agreement with the Child Development Council of Franklin County, allowing use of the main level for their Head Start program, a program offering preschool to economically disadvantaged families. The program currently has 68 students enrolled for half-day preschool, with an additional 20 to be added to their all-day preschool program. Based on the successful startup of the program and the planned area enrollment growth that we talked about at the last meeting with the construction of the villages at Central College, that includes 71 single-family homes and 240 apartments, we are recommending that we hold on any changes to this site, maintain the property as is. We can reevaluate this site's future as part of the next facility master plans, which we would tentatively present in December. As a reminder, the current Head Start program expires July 31st of 2017, but either party may terminate the lease agreement for any reason without penalty by giving a 90-day notice.
I'm with you on that.
All right.
Okay, and that one?
Thoughts?
We're going to continue operating Head Start there, and we'll take that a little bit at a time as it comes along, and it leaves us the opportunity, we have the building, the property, if there's future growth needs in that area that we want to address, it leaves us that opportunity, but
So our contract's till 17,
yeah,
till the end of 17?
Till it is July 31st of 2017, but again, 90-day notice, either party can terminate without penalty.
If they were to terminate, that would change probably the complexion of how we looked at that site at that point, because it does need repair. But we think, as we look at capital improvements, this offers us the opportunity to tighten up some lug nuts and paint some walls as we need to along the way to keep that building moving along the way we need to.
There's no major things
Yeah, that's what I was
at this point that you foresee. You can hold it together till 2017, you think?
There's some structural components that do need addressed, that we would recommend doing those. The windows is something that the original portion of the building, we can hold. It's single pane, it's pane glass, it's rather drafty, but we've got them sealed up. They don't function, but we're not utilizing those classrooms as well. So I would recommend we hold on that, again, determine what the future
Yeah,
looks
as long
like.
as we're not putting a lot of money into it at this point,
I
you
think
know.
we want to put the money where there's potential liability issues.
There's only, and that's in the back where they're using those 2 rooms, right, sort of? I mean, they're not using those front, where the windows are that you're taping up, or are they?
The 2 on the main level that are in use, it's a newer section of the building.
Right.
The classroom that they've set up for all-day preschool is the first one in the upper level. That is the original windows.
Oh, okay.
But again, I think we can hold on that for the next year and reevaluate it at the next facility master plan meeting.
Great.
I think we want to watch what's happening with that neighborhood across the street. Meeting with the city today, it looks like they have the go-ahead to execute that. So we just want to watch what's happening there. That could potentially be a lot of families. And is that something where we want to create a boundary for that area? And could that be an attendance boundary for Central College? Not suggesting that, it's just an option.
Well, and let's mention that in terms of the value of the asset that we have, right? I think that, kind of going back to Dr. Nesterbaker's point, seriously, we have an obligation for good stewardship of the resources that we have. That's a significant chunk of land, right? And again, going back to this point of, we're not in this mode of just simply tear down and rebuild. We have an asset that frankly is extremely valuable given its location. Now, granted, the value is inherent within the land, not within the building.
True.
Right? So, realistically, what we want to do is make sure that we're defending and protecting that land, based on the potential, specifically the potential of the population growth and the development growth in that particular corridor. Right? So I think it's wise that we continue to maintain this property. I think it's wise that we continue to use it for the purpose that we've now, oriented towards, because it's good stewardship, right? We need to stay on top of this property so it doesn't, run into the risk of being a lost asset for the district.
One more quick question. I agree with everything that's been said insofar as I know what the actual condition is of the building. I just want to make sure that as we hold it together, that we do so in a way that is supportive of the small children that are there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If we reach that juncture point where it wasn't good for that, we'll fix it.
I know we will, but I think
The
it's
fix might
worth
be we
saying
move
so
it
that
to
nobody
someplace
has
else,
any
right?
doubt.
Yeah, the fix might be we have to make the hard decision of putting that program someplace else.
Yes.
If we need to. So
Yeah.
we understand that.
Good,
Right.
good.
Okay, the last property to talk about, the warehouse annex, is property we own in Uptown Westerville. It is 3,400 square feet of garage-type space on .2 acres, built in 1950. In 2010, the property was appraised at $120,000, and with the turn in the market, it was appraised in November at $160,000. The space had been used for document storage and surplus equipment storage, but with new programs such as online document management and GovDeals, a web-based software program for auctioning surplus equipment, warehouse storage needs are declining. The space is currently being used to store the track equipment for Central High School. This is a picture of the annex after we completed repairs to the damaged concrete block and after painting the exterior. Funds to replace the windows and garage doors have been put on hold. It was part of this current 5-year plan, but it's been put on hold pending a long-term decision on the property. So in conclusion, these are those topics for discussion. In summary, it is our recommendation to move technology and instructional materials, which it sounds like that's been granted. That the board approve the renovation and expansion of Point View, starting the design in February. and that consideration be given to fund the project using general funds, but what I'm hearing is we're going to fund with capital funds, kind of watch what's happening with what's happening around the state with state budgeting. We recommend maintaining Central College to support the Head Start program, which again, I think we have our direction there that we're going to continue as is. And that consideration be given to selling the warehouse property due to the operational improvements with document storage and disposition of surplus equipment. We do believe these recommendations will help as we strive to provide learning and working environments that are safe, nurturing, and efficient. So if there's any further discussion, we would welcome
Well,
it.
the last item, the warehouse annex.
Talk about it.
Pardon?
We didn't talk about it.
No, that's what I'm bringing up.
Yeah.
So you say there's something in there that is for owned or utilized by Central High School?
That's correct. It is
Their
the,
location that can be put?
And can you give the background on why it's there?
Okay.
sure.
What's there?
It was being, it's the padding for the high jump and the long jump that was being stored under the bleachers, and the fire marshal is not allowing that to be stored under the bleachers, so we had to come up with an alternate solution. The existing storage facility on that site is not large enough to house it, so we've temporarily been housing it, and this is the first year we've done that, so our warehouse guys have picked it up, moved it up, and I think some of you have been over to see that there's a lot of padding in there.
So, and historically, there was a slight miss on the build of Central for the storage space for those materials. That's a topic that's come up in the Central community before. So the issue there is that in order to relocate them, there's a need for some square footage to do that at Central. So it's a bit of an awkward situation, but it literally was, going back in the day when Central was built,
Right.
a miss.
So it can't be moved to the Spring Street, what is that other building at the corner of
Our
Spring?
warehouse,
And
there's not room.
there's no room in
for-
there?
For that's taking up a lot of space with those pads.
Yeah.
Yes. So, again, it's just one option we kicked around, that we could take the funds, a portion of the funds from the sale, and dedicate that to a storage facility, and we'd still be coming out ahead with, if we sold it at 160.
We could always cover it with a canvas, couldn't we? Put it out in
That-
put it out there in the field at Central and just cover it?
I'm a former track guy, and so I can tell you, when you start talking about hurdles and pads, those pads
What?
run into the thousands of dollars for the high jump and for the
Oh, I thought it was a
pole vault
tractor.
pit.
I'm sorry.
No, it's the track equipment.
Oh, I thought you said
So you're
tractor.
talking hurdles and high jump pads
Oh.
and pole vault pads, and they run into the thousands of dollars. And they do come equipped with a pad that you can use in the springtime, but it's weather like this when you leave them out, yeah, they'll
No,
fall
that
apart.
wouldn't
So
work too
they have struggled with storage there. We've had discussions with them about some support for storage there. This was the temporary solution, where this is like having a third car garage, and you go, oh, sure, you can store your stuff there, and
Yeah.
and then you never get it out. So it's not a facility that long-term, or even really short-term, has, we don't have, we can manufacture a need for it, but it'll be like that. It'll be like your third car garage, where you always stick something in there because you have the space. But it's not something that we really need, and there's probably value to selling it and using the revenue for something else.
So the only alternative is to build, is that what you've come up with, or is there no way to?
One option.
Is there another? I'm not sure I see any other.
At Central,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never roamed the premises to see what they have or don't have, so I don't really have an inventory, and I don't know what Mr. Rose is.
What about a storage shed?
I know what I'm used to, yeah.
Yeah, it would-
Storage shed.
it would
I mean, just a
Well,
shed.
I think that this is, yeah, I have some background with this one. I would say that unfortunately, the requirements, building code requirements and those types of issues would not make this an Amish barn solution, right? This is a bit more of a capital project, unfortunately, and I've had some discussions with staff and administration at Central. It's not a non-trivial or inexpensive fix. It's also not astronomical, but we've got some cost if we build some storage there.
Is there no room in any of the other high schools?
But I think they want it at Central.
Oh, of
I mean, I
course they
think
do.
that taking it back and forth, that's,
Well, I understand. They're taking it back and forth right now from the
yeah, but
building.
But they weren't. Well, they're not running now.
That's a new development. We just pulled that one out of a hat this fall.
How big a space would you need to store them?
They originally requested a facility that would be in line with what you see at Walnut Springs and Genoa. So we priced that out, and it didn't go through the litmus test internally, so we were asked to scale that back. And the last, I don't even know exactly the size, but in terms of cost, scaling back what's at Walnut Springs and Genoa was roughly $90,000. And keep in mind, there's no electric out there, so you've got to trench a long way to get electric to that site. It's more than, as Mr. Bird said, just putting in a pole barn out there.
9,000?
90.
90.
Oh, 90.
So by the time you do everything, it's probably going to be 100.
Are you relatively sure that if we sold this facility and needed to build some kind of storage at Central, close to Central, we would not exceed whatever the cost, whatever we reaped in the sale?
Well, there's a loaded question. So assuming we reap 160,
Right.
I would say yes.
Okay.
I'm very confident with that.
I want to make this distinction. We're not proposing that we sell it to pay for the storage at Central. We're proposing to sell it. We know there's a storage need at Central that will need to be funded, but we want to take a close look at that. So I don't want to leave this impression that this is about selling this to put something in at Central. This is about disposing of a property that at this time administration feels we don't have a use for it. And we put something there that hadn't been there in the past out of convenience to accommodate that. But this is not a even-sum game. Now,
Okay.
the board can give us direction and say, well, we definitely would like you to do that. But I would rather know what the inventory of all the schools are in terms of storage before we go down a path of making a promise to one building without looking at everything.
So we're basically just looking at sell or not sell, is what you would like us to look at.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, this is right behind my house and catty-cornered to another property I own, and it's ugly. I mean, it's just flat ugly. There's no other way to.
We were going to paint
They
it something
painted
really
it.
bright.
It's better, but it's still, lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
But, with that said, yeah, that's right. With that said, there is likely to be concern in the neighborhood over what's going to happen with that piece of property. And I've already talked with people who have concerns over it and people who have ideas for it. So, it's just like everything else. When we talk about, do we talk to Point View people? Do we talk to these people? Do we talk to that people? Right now, we're just saying we're going to unload this property, and we have no way of working with the community, working with the neighborhood around what's likely to happen with that. Now, I realize there are some ways that we can, make very public and should make very public anything that goes on around the sale of that. But I just want to put a cautionary tale out there whenever we start talking about selling any of our property, or if we were, for some odd reason, which we're not, talking about buying property, that it has a significant impact on whatever neighborhood that it's in. And even the pig that this is, it sits squarely in Old Westerville. So we have to be cognizant of that. And by the way, I have also been approached by a couple of nonprofits who are interested in it, as well as, people that we've all talked to over the years that are interested in that property. So it's quite possible that there could be interest in it from a number of entities.
My comments and thoughts, first of all, about this, and I realize Westerville's, very nostalgic and,
For that?
uptown and all that stuff. Oh, yeah, even that. But
Yeah, actually, because it used to have a lot of school transportation stuff there, so people have
Sure.
told me, well, when I used to work, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, but my concern is, this is a facility that we do not utilize, and we're looking at, as Mr. LaRose said, replacing windows and garage doors and putting a bunch of money into it if we don't get rid of it. So my comments are that, at this point, this is something we should unload. that we're not utilizing and that is just going to cost us money. So that's, I'm looking at it strictly from a financial point of view, and also, it's something we've been looking at, and we're, instead of utilizing, we're taking things out of it. Everything is out of it, pretty much. And money would have to be put in it. And we've already painted it, I guess, in the last year or two, whatever they did to it, and fixed a few things. But rather than dump more money into it, my vote would be to sell it.
To address Dr. Nestor Baker's concern, what we could do, because I think we need to bring, if we do go to sale, we have to do a resolution, am I correct,
Yes,
Bart?
we
Which
do.
we're not going to do this evening. So a thought would be that a sale then to a private entity through auction, right, would mean that the person who bought it would be under the scrutiny of the city in terms of what can happen there. So one of the things we could do for the board and for our own edification is to sit down with the city and talk about what limitations to what could happen here under their purview would be, so that we're not walking in blindly and just tossing the neighborhood out to whatever happens, and someone puts in a 4-story high-rise parking garage there, and that's what Dr. Nestor Baker has to look at from her back porch.
I
you know.
put up a big fence so I don't have to look at it as it is.
I think,
No, I'm
I
just
agree.
teasing.
I don't
My
want
dogs
to,
watch it for you.
I don't want to stir up.
I'll send you a bill.
So I think we could do that. We could sit down with the city and even have Mr. Byrd as the facilities representation sit down with us and just talk about what does that mean if it goes out of our hands to a private entity's hands in terms of what might happen back there.
Well, with selling it, just to be clear, when we sell property, we can either sell it to another governmental entity, which doesn't require us to go to auction at all. So we could sell it to another governmental entity, or we could take it to auction. But that's only necessary if it's a private individual to buy it. So we could choose to sell it to a governmental entity, right?
Good. In another district I worked at, we actually had an agreement, resolution with the city to facilitate the sale and the use of that building. And if the city deemed it possible, it went through. If it didn't, they sold it back to us, and we actually demolished this particular elementary. They were trying to find out if it was a senior home or whatever. But the city had full control to monitor what went in that building, and it was up to them to approve it, and then we basically gave them that permission. So it was a joint venture with the city, which you could do here.
Okay,
So something else to consider. I don't mean to throw a twist into this, but we are taking this away for discussion and consideration. If there is, and I'm not opposed to the sale of this building at all. I have no personal love affair with this cinder block work of art. However, if there is community demand from a repurposing standpoint, should we not also consider cash flowing this property? Right? If we lease this property, we're getting a return, and we have the ability to manage the use of that property. Not suggesting that that's an answer, right, but suggesting that we consider it in the course of sale, lease, or keep as a possibility.
I'll give you my comments on that, because when I first got on the board, one of the issues we discussed was the fact that we are in the real estate business, and we were, and we shouldn't be. So that's my personal feeling. No, I don't see us leasing it or getting cash flow from it, because I don't think we should be in the real estate business. And so that's my reason for, probably that option would be off the table for me, but.
so my thoughts, real quick, when we sold the properties on Walnut, did we talk to the city anything about that and see what was going to happen to those in the future? I mean, I know you gave us an idea, but were there any parameters put around it? Because I completely understand why Nancy would be concerned, but I have to also wonder, are we doing our job? I mean, our job is, do we need the facility? Yes or no? If not, sell it. I mean, I don't want to be cold, but I am, I guess.
I'm not suggesting we not sell it. I'm suggesting we need to make sure that we do due diligence in what we do to it.
But have we done that before?
Those two properties were not in the midst of a neighborhood.
When we met with the city in terms of 135 and 145 East Walnut, I was asking, because at that time, what are options for us? Could we convert this space to more than what it was capable of for administrative use? And we couldn't get it rezoned. They kind of grandfathered us in with using it for administrative space, but those two properties were residential. My concern was, would we sell the White House as residential with what was flanking it? As it ended up, it worked out well. It's my understanding, having some preliminary conversations with the city, this particular property could be residential or commercial.
Okay. So,
I think it's time to have some very specific conversations with the city and discuss with them their plans for uptown and their plans and needs as regards all the facilities uptown, and get a better handle on what is actually needed, and that will then tell us how we need to progress, or at least will tell me. You know, like I say, I'm not interested in holding on to it for the sake of holding on to it. I actually have some concerns about it because there has been some gang graffiti on it a couple of times. That tells me that it's not well used enough to keep people away that shouldn't be messing around there. So I'm not opposed to selling it, but what I want to do is make sure that we do it in a deliberate, appropriate way for that particular part of our
Well,
community.
My question is, why do you feel that we're obligated to have discussion with the city on it? That's only my question. You know, if we put this thing up for auction like we did the other properties, city certainly has an opportunity to bid on it just like anyone else. I don't see why we're waiting to
It
make...
doesn't have to go up for auction if the city might want it.
That's correct. The city does have,
The city can select.
because they're another,
They can buy it
because
themselves.
they're another government entity. They have the right to, you
Do
can,
they
you
not
can.
know that they probably don't at this point, but they
That would
know
be,
it's been empty,
They-
do they not?
that would be the, kind of the intent of going to the city is twofold. You have interest, how does it fit into your uptown plan?
Maybe we put the word out that it's available, and anyone that, you know, at this
Well,
point.
I'd like to jump in here in terms of the conversations with the city. I mean, we've been meeting with the city around macro development issues now for several months, as we're looking to kind of coordinate our plans. I will say that none of those conversations have gone down to specific micro conversations related to uptown, right? I would have to agree with Dr. Nestor Baker that it's worthwhile to have a conversation with the city, a formal conversation with them about their interests, about their development plans, where they want to go with this, not cutting off our decision as a board, how we will dispose of the property, right? But I do think that there's a opportunity for us to kind of continue to work in good faith and continuing to build our relationship with our city government partners. That being said, you know, if there's an opportunity for us to look at the property from a private sale standpoint or auction standpoint, I don't think that's off the table either. I think these are all the things that we need to kind of take away and have some discussions about. But I don't think that, you know, liquidating quickly is probably at the top of the list on this. We got to take some
Yeah.
due diligence, so.
Yeah, there've been informal conversations for years around that building, literally years and years, with the city, with people who own property uptown and so forth. We're not in an emergency fire sale kind of situation where we got to go sell the thing tomorrow. So I think it's time for some formal conversation so that, you know, all the informal stuff really doesn't matter. What matters is what's the formal conversation, what's the need, then we can determine what we want to do.
Is that a kind of, and I'm not sure what's appropriate in the conversation with the city or not, is it along the lines of, city, we are selling this building. What is your interest in this building and in this location? That kind of direct
Well, I
conversation?
think it should be direct. I think it should be, we don't feel we have a need for this building anymore, and we're planning At this point, it looks as though we're going to sell.
That's what I mean.
So,
That's
do you guys want it? If so,
Right.
what's your thinking around it? If
Right.
you aren't interested, or we don't like what your thinking
Right.
is around it, we're putting it up for private auction.
Yeah, and it sounds like all of us are saying this, we don't have a need for it, we're going to sell, and I don't know if we'd even phrase it this way, first right of refusal, whatever city, it's another government entity, we can go to them. But it seems to me that there's some consensus to sell the property, some consensus to go directly to the city, and because if we got to go to the city, fulfill that pretty direct conversation of we're selling this, because it seems to me that the power in approaching the city really is in those of us that live in Uptown, and saying, if you're buying this, we want to know. We want, not so much the Board of Education saying to the city, but the Uptown community saying, you're buying this, what are your plans?
Well, I don't think that that's inconsistent with the conversations even since I've joined the board in the facilities and liaison role. We have some tough conversations with our city colleagues around everything from easements and right-of-ways to cell phone towers to, I mean, you name the number of them. I think we have a certain license to be able to speak very frankly with our city counterparts, which we would not have the ability to do with a private party purchasing the property. And I think it's worthwhile to do it. I know that, and Dr. Kellogg already offered, I think we just take away, we'll set that discussion up.
Yes.
And we'll get started, and then we'll figure out what it is the best course of action is for the property.
Yeah.
And that still leaves us in a position that we'd have to bring a resolution to the board to
Yeah,
approve
before
it.
those
Right.
doors fall
Right.
down, we have to replace the doors, okay?
And paint
Okay,
it
Jeff?
purple.
I've toured this building. It's in pretty good shape structurally. It
Yeah,
may not
it's
be a
not
place
bad.
that you want to sleep in overnight.
I've been in it too.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you have what you need?
I do. Thank you so much.
So thank you to Mr. LaRose for his hard work. Thank you for the conversation. I'm going to rewind. We had said we wanted to do this in kind of work session format. I hope that that's kind of what you felt and that we satisfied that. I think we have our direction. I think we know where we're going, and you gave us some great direction this evening, and we're looking forward to moving forward. So thank you, Mr. LaRose, for your time, and thank you to your staff for all the hard work that they're doing on behalf of our kids every day.